My daughter, who was working for the Alberta Triathlon Association as a summer student, got me a sample. And myself and my friend Gunther Tragesser spent a few nights over a few beers, put 40 pages of a bid together. I flew to Fort McMurray. Didn't know who Triathlon Canada was. Presented a bid and was awarded it for 1996. And I guess did quite a good job that people suggested we should bid for Worlds. And here we are on our third Worlds. We hosted the World Championship in 2001. It was meant to be one event. We had no plan to stay on and do World Cups. ITU and the city asked for that, and we did that until 2007. And then Vancouver had the World Championships in 2008. So we thought, well, it's time maybe, to change things up, and maybe it's good for it to be in another city. But then we turned our attention to forming the Academy. And the Academy was founded in 2010. And it's like the chicken and the egg. Now before we had the race and we didn't have an academy. Now we have an academy and no race. So we made the decision to bring back the World Cup. And I was stepping down from my role at ITU at the time, so it was my mad idea to bring back the World Cup in 2011. And then in 2012, one of my colleagues from ITU said, do you think Edmonton could do 2014? They were banking on San Diego, and that didn't happen. And we jumped in and did the World Championship. The other thing about the grand final is that versus the annual event is part of the series, part of those athletes on the circuit gathering points towards World Championships and towards major games, Commonwealth Games, Pan Am Games, Olympic Games. But then they do the grand final. That includes the age group athletes, where you have everyone up to 80 in 5-year increments, where you have the junior athletes, where you have U23. And we've recently, of course, added para as well. So that the grand final is 10 times bigger than the annual event. It's over 5 days, 5 or 6 days of competition and opening ceremonies, closing ceremonies. So it's like, the grand final is like a little mini Olympics in some ways because of all the various competitions that are included inside it. I think that the sport started out at the Ironman distance. And I mean, that's not achievable for everyone. It's not achievable in terms of the time you need to train. It's not achievable in terms of actually doing it. But what's happened with the evolution of the sport, you can use that word of the sport that's only been around for 30 years, but I think you can, is that the shorter distances are becoming the most popular. Like the sprint distance, which is a 750-meter sprint, 20K bike and a 5K run, is very manageable and very easy to train for. You don't have to put in hours and hours of training for that. The other unique thing about triathlon is that gender equity is ingrained in the constitution. So from the very first World Championships in Avignon in 1989, it was equal prize money for men and women. And that was a big deal at the time, and it was a big discussion. And in fact, it was the men, it was the elite athletes that came into the Congress and demanded that the women got equal prize money, even though there were probably 25% women versus men in the race. And that's been there ever since. Every step of the way, that gender equity is there. And that, again, I think is a really important aspect of ITU. We want to fill the course with spectators all around. And by 2020, we will have 150,000 people lining the course. When you have a sport on TV, there's nothing as boring as seeing people riding out and nobody's in the background. You can't just put on a race. You have to manage all these other things and get all these other people there. And I think that's a really important thing for the citizens of Edmonton to want to come out and see those athletes. Hosting international events, bringing people from 40 different countries into Horlick Park to swim, bike and run is something to be proud of. And it is something to care about. And even, why should Edmontonians, why should parents, why should people care? It's a great model. You come here and you can see, a kid that's 13 competing. You can see somebody who's 85 competing. And you can see the best in the world competing. And I just think that that is something to be proud of, to embrace, and to get involved and engaged in.
I grew up in an athletic family. My mom was a national team rower and my dad's a really good runner, so my parents put us in kind of all sports, me and my brother and sister. I was a dancer for 15 years, like ballet, tap, jazz, which is kind of funny because it doesn't really relate to triathlon in any way, but I started swimming when I was 11 and stuck with that sport all the way through high school, university, because I loved it so much. And started running in high school and incorporating that into my training a little bit, just because I was naturally a good runner from my genetics and swimming background. When I was 16, I tried my first triathlon based on a recommendation from my track coach at the time. And I won it and made the junior national team, and suddenly I was still a swimmer, but triathlon was now my main focus, and I went to Worlds and I was on the national team from then until basically now. It kind of became a new focus for me where I was having this great success, but I could still train with the Kiana Swim Club and I could train with the U of A swim team and run for the varsity team at U of A. So basically all through my school in Edmonton, I trained in the individual sports, but then raced triathlon in the summer. It was a great way to do it. I think I raced my best that way. It does become a full-time job when you take 3 different sports and you're trying to be at an international level and go to the Olympics. It's a lot of time, and that's one of the reasons I had to put school on hold for 4 years, because I was just training so much and it takes the full day to recover properly and then to get enough training sessions in a day. So they do transfer over fitness-wise, like when you're injured in one sport you can make up for a bit in the other sport, so it's nice from that perspective. It's different than just being a pure sport athlete in one event where you're just a runner or just a cyclist. I'd be faster at one thing if I just focused on that one thing, but you have to be good at 3 things. So it's an extra challenge, and it adds diversity to the training. So that's why I enjoy it the most, is because I don't have to come swim 10 times a week like I used to. I can swim 5 times a week, and then I'm cycling 6 times a week. So there's a good mix of activity that keeps things interesting and keeps your body, use different muscles for each one. So it kind of balances it out. It makes you really fit. You have to train so much, but that's what I do for my job, so I love it. Cycling was funny because I didn't really start doing that seriously until I moved to Victoria in 2010 around to start training more seriously for triathlon, but in Edmonton it's hard to train cycling, especially in the winter. So I was swimming and running so much that in the junior elite races I could get by with not much cycling, and I think technically my cycling skills were not great, but that's okay when you're only 17 or 18 years old. And since then I've evolved more, that cycling's become my strength now, and I do it way more than I used to. But when you're swimming 10 times a week, running 5 times a week, that it was okay to kind of let that slide a little, because my fitness would transfer over. But as the races get more technical and difficult, as you become an elite versus a junior, you kind of have to put more focus on the bike because it's so technical. For triathlon, it's finding a balance where you can be world-class but not get injured, because you're doing so much training, and not just injury, but fatigue or getting enough recovery as well as training hard enough to be the best in the world. That's kind of where I've had a difficulty finding that balance. I was #1 in the world when I was 21 years old, and then I crossed the line and became injured, and now I'm having a hard time getting back into racing. It's a difficult thing to do, and often people find the balance and then it's hard to stay there. You either get hurt or you get older and things change, and you can't be the best in the world for 10 years in a row. Like, that's never happened before. That's the hardest thing, because there are 3 sports, so you can get sucked into overtraining, and it became my whole life for 4 or 5 years. It was all-consuming almost. It was hard to get out of my triathlon head, even just for the evening or for a weekend, to get a break from it. What I've realized as I get older, it's taken me a long time to realize this, but having a life balance is so important, and that's why I'm in Edmonton right now, going to U of A, finishing my degree, because my best years in triathlon was when I was splitting my year between school and then half the year racing. So I've gone back to that a little bit. It's hard to do because you do have to dedicate a lot of time to school, and fitting training around that can be challenging, but I think it's really important, especially for the winter months where racing's not really started yet. It's been great for me to be back at school, be with my friends who aren't in triathlon, so there's other things to think about and talk about. When I live in Boulder, Colorado for some of the year, which is where my training base is, and when I'm there, it's an all-consuming thing, and that's important for certain times of the year, because we do want to race on the world-class level, and You need to be all in if you're going to do that, but it's also important to get out of it sometimes and still be training seriously. I still do 20 hours of training a week here, but also having other things like school, and I'm not always thinking about triathlon, so it's really a healthy thing, I think. And my goals for the future, it's hard to say now because I don't know what this year is going to bring. It's a post-Olympic year, and I'd love to go to Tokyo in 2020. That's kind of my ultimate big goal for the next 4 years, but 4 years is a long time to think about. So this summer, it's just to get back racing and try some different styles of racing. I'm going to do some longer non-draft races and hopefully be racing the Edmonton WTS race in Montreal, and we'll see how the summer goes, but I still love it. I think it kind of gets ingrained into your blood, and I can't go a day without exercising because I value that, and it makes me feel better. And so even if I'm not training seriously, I would still be active every day.
In grade 2, I was watching on a Saturday morning the Kona, Hawaii Ironman, and I said I want to do that someday. That kind of inspired me to always think about doing a triathlon someday, and I would set up little triathlons when I was a kid, just with skateboarding and bikes and running with the kids in the neighborhood, but never did my first one until the summer between grade 9 and grade 10. And I registered for it. I had a BMX bike, so I borrowed one of my buddy's mountain bikes, and then it started from there. And I kind of just did one Kids of Steel race every year until I got into university, and if I could make the provincial team the next year, that was my goal. But I got the last spot that year and got to try out going to nationals and training with the other kids, on the provincial team, and that kind of just got the ball rolling even more. And so I took a loan out from the bank and bought my first bike and just rolled it from there. My goal as a junior, coming up through first, second, third, and fourth year university, was to try to make the junior national team. And I was successful in making the provincial team those 4 years through university. And in my last year, as a junior, I just missed out, and I finished, they had 6 spots and I finished 7th. So I just missed it, but I kept going, and shortly after that, I believe it was 2005, I made my first national team in long course. And for the past 5-6 years, both my wife and I have been on the national team every year. We competed. We took our 3 kids at the time to New Zealand, spent a month in New Zealand traveling around, and then did the World Championships in 2012 in New Zealand, and raced. We raced here at Horlack Park, and last year our whole family was in Mexico racing. Both my wife and I were racing, but my whole family went. And this past year my wife had an excellent season and was a national champ in the duathlon for her age group. My youngest is Isabel. She's 3 years old and did her very first triathlon today. We did some training on Thursday with her at the pool just to try 25 meters, and we grabbed the flutterboard and she swam 325 meters. So she's gung-ho, and she told the sailfish coach where all our kids swim, she said she was training for a marathon. So she's kind of got a bit of the bug, which is nice. And then next, Zoe, she just turned 6. She's in kindergarten. She did her first triathlon a couple of years ago, and this was her 3rd one this year already, and she's definitely having a lot of fun with it. She likes biking around our block with us. And then Zachary is in grade 2, and he's just turned 8 years old a few weeks ago, and he's got a lot of fire in him. He loves swimming fast and biking fast and running fast. Today on the bike course, he almost missed the turn because he was biking so fast. He's got a real passion for it as well. And then Sammy is in grade 4, and he's 9 years old, And yeah, he swims with the other 2 kids. He loves trying many different sports, cross-country skiing. He wants to get into biathlon, this whole shooting and sword thing with fencing too. He likes a variety of things and a little bit into boxing. He hasn't boxed, but he wants to because he loves Rocky. And that was something that actually our family, we did on spring break. We were down in New York and we took the train to Philadelphia because they wanted to run up the Rocky steps. That was their highlight of their trip to New York, was going to Philadelphia, running up the Rocky steps. But yeah, all 4 of them enjoy doing it. And then, yeah, and my wife and I do it once in a while too, which is nice. I love triathlon because of the adrenaline that comes along with it. I love pushing it on the swim, getting out of the swim and running as fast as I can to my bike and hopping on the bike and feeling that burn in my thighs while I'm mashing those gears, and then hopping off and just trying to hold on to get to the finish line. Painful sometimes, but that feeling of accomplishment when you hit the finish line is hard to match.
I think it's a very unintimidating sport because there is such a diverse group of people that are racing. So you go from people who've never done it before to people who are going to the Olympics, all racing at the same event at the Edmonton race. So the nice thing about triathlon too is there's so many different distances. So there's the triathlon where you're swimming 300 meters, running a 2K at the end, and all the way up to an Ironman where you're out all day for 10 hours. So there's such a diverse range of distances that I think you can train to whatever suits your, the time that you have to put into the training and what your strength is, if it's more speed and going fast, or endurance and going hard all day. If you have cap and goggles to swim in the pool, and any bike will do for your first one. I know it gets very fancy and people get all the expensive equipment, and you can kind of get sucked into this triathlon bubble where you just want all the best gear, but as long as you have a bike and a helmet and bike shoes and a pair of running shoes, you'll be fine. I think anyone can do it.
That is something that's beautiful about the sport of triathlon. I truly think that anybody can do it. For some, a barrier is, getting into the pool and swimming. They might not have the greatest stroke, but you can still do it. Almost anybody can ride a bike, and almost anybody can go for a run. And to put the 3 together, it's tough, but it is open to anybody. And they do have the races open for age groupers that anybody can do. And then the age groupers stick around and they watch the elites go. And usually that inspires them to train a little bit harder so they can do a little bit better next year. So I think triathlon is an excellent sport to do that. Yeah, anybody can do it.
You're swimming in the same lake that we swim in, and you're biking on the same course, and you're running the same course. So it's a cool way to do it because you can race on Saturday and then the next day watch the elites race on the same course that you just competed on. So I think that's another awesome thing about triathlon is all these races that I go to worldwide have thousands of age groupers racing the day before us, and then the day after they're all lining the course cheering for us. As time goes on, I appreciate it more and more that people really look up to that and they aspire to maybe go to the Olympics or just be the best athletes they can be. And if I can inspire kids to get into sport or pursue it at an elite level, I think that's one of the coolest parts about my success that I had in the past.
You get to race on the same course, then you get to have a shower, you get to go in the beer garden, you get to go and have a burger, and then you get to go in the grandstand and watch the best in the world. I mean, what more could you ask for?
I think it's so important to have cities become involved in this, in any sport, but it's nice to see Edmonton thrive and to be, renowned around the world for a spot in triathlon. You know, it's a testament to our volunteers, to people like Sheila O'Kelly, to our city who support the sport, and you know, it creates an incredible environment, venue, just so beautiful for the race to be run, and athletes from all over the world love the Edmonton stop because it's such a great race course. Horlack Park is unbelievable. You can sit anywhere, and you know, it's just a perfect place for spectators. You know, they've created something I think magical in Edmonton. And am I surprised? No, I think that's what Edmonton does. You know, they do a great job of it. I'm impressed, but not surprised. And I'm so happy that athletes from all over the world flock here every year to, you know, enjoy our surroundings and compete in our river valley.
I don't think I see it going anywhere. I think that as we build up to 2020, we want to build on everything that we have done to date. We're not sitting on our laurels. We're not just thinking, oh, we just do another grand final. Through the next 3 to 4 years, 3.5 years, I guess, we want to build more in the community. We want to see triathlon at the university. There is a university club here, but we want to see it as an official sport and have that impact. And if Edmonton can play a role in that, I mean, the city of Edmonton has invested so much resources and cash into this sport. I don't see it leaving. And in fact, when we presented our bid in Madrid, we were asked, what about 2021? Because ITU sees Edmonton as a solid, sound city and event. And I think that they would like to continue a relationship. What it'll be like, I don't know. Will I be doing it? Likely not.